Hello everyone, today I was gonna explain something outside of KSP, and for a start I thought I might explain what these things on helicopters are. Now I'm still kind of improvising and learning, and any feedback is still welcome, but let's get on to the topic. You may have noticed these spiky things on the top and bottom front of helicopters that look a bit like they were put there by some movie prop designer to look mean, but they actually serve a purpose. And they actually do what they're called. They're called cable cutters, and at this point, that's about how far common knowledge might get the average person. But you'll then start to think in disbelief, well, why would there be a knife attached to a helicopter to fly up to a cable and cut it? But that's not actually what it does. It's an emergency precaution, and what looks like a blade is actually not a blade. It's just a blunt piece of metal that just guides the cable. And essentially, what it does is that if the helicopter accidentally flies into a cable at high speed, then that's always dangerous, but it's meant to reduce the risk because usually, without those, the cable would either hit the rotor or the skids or landing gear, and even if it hits the windshield, which is much more likely statistically and geometrically, it would just skid off the windshield, and due to the shape of the windshield, it would most likely end up in the rotor because the actual front point of the windshield is usually below half of the helicopter, and that's catastrophic. Even if it hits the landing gear, that's usually catastrophic at higher speeds, but if it hits the rotor, that's totally catastrophic. It will definitely destroy the rotor mechanism, maybe at high speeds just cut the rotor clean off. But these things are supposed to catch the cable, and what looks like a blade actually just guides the cable, and in the at the lower bit of the look-alike blade is this little dent, and the cable ends up inside that dent, and there's the actual little blade that cuts the cable. Now that's still not totally reliable, but at least it makes it a little bit safer, and it gives you a bit more of a chance to survive in case you accidentally hit a cable with a helicopter. Uh, in fact, in most cases, you have still a roughly 95% chance that this actually cuts the cable and saves the helicopter. Now, the exact implementation of this system is very different between helicopter types, but the little device itself always looks extremely similar, as you can see in these pictures. Uh, you'd almost always have one on the top of the cabin, uh, just behind the windshield, and sometimes below too. Though on top is much higher priority because well, the cable usually ends up on top because of the shape of the windshield, and the windshield is itself is usually rather sturdy because if you fly forward, the cable most likely hits within the middle about 10 centimeters of the windshield, which usually isn't actually a windshield. The windshield is, in most helicopter types, split in two, and in the middle there's a metal kind of beam that holds the two windshield halves. And simply because the actual nose point of the helicopter is usually below the half of the helicopter, there's, depending on helicopter type, a roughly 80% chance that the cable would slip to the upside of the cabin, and just about a 20% chance that it slips to the downside. And also, on the upper half, the consequences are much more catastrophic. because obviously the rotor is much more critical and high speed, high precision, and if it malfunctions in any way, it usually leads to a crash, whereas the landing gear or the skids, if you fly at high speeds, it's still really bad because it will catch the cable and kind of flip the helicopter forward, which can actually destroy the rotor too if it happens too fast, and it's probably deadly too, but there's a higher chance of surviving it than at the rotor, and also it's just much more likely that the cable will end up on the upside of the cabin. So you'll usually find one on the upper side of the windshield and sometimes also on the lower side. And a few helicopter types don't even have one at all. It also depends on what the helicopter type was intended for use. Like, if a helicopter type usually just flies at really high altitude and is rather unlikely to ever hit a cable, then it's less likely for the designers to implement such a system than if the helicopter operates in environments where it's really likely to accidentally run into a cable. I hope you kind of like that video. I'm still learning and I'm open for any kind of feedback, and thanks for watching.